They show up wearing pink, some of them holding signs. They line the streets cheering on a woman named Karen Reed. She's not a celebrity. She's not a war hero. She's a college professor accused of murdering a Boston police officer named John O'Keefe. John and Karen were a couple who were practically living together. But on the night of January 28th, going into the early mornings of the 29th, they were out together. First at C.F. McCarthy's in downtown Canton, Massachusetts. Then at the Waterfall Bar. And finally, inside Karen's SUV in front of Brian Albert's house, who was having an after party with a bunch of the folks who were at the waterfall. The big question is, what happened to John O'Keefe after he stepped out of Karen's car? Prosecutors say she backed over him on purpose and drove away, leaving him in the snow to die. Karen says that's not true and believes John went into that after party, got ambushed, and was placed onto the front lawn to die in the cold. She also believes the people in the house, along with state and local police, framed her for John's murder. Tonight, we are live from the courthouse where the jury saw videos from inside the bars today. What do they show? What do they prove? We'll bring in our experts to answer those questions as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Officer John O'Keefe.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. The story continues. The drama continues inside the courtroom as the jury tries to figure out what happened to Officer John O'Keefe. That's what this case is about. They're the finders of fact. They're the ones who have to determine and tell us what happened to John O'Keefe. There are some things that we do know based on testimony and video. John and Karen were bar hopping that night in Canton, Massachusetts. We've got surveillance video of them doing it. We've got testimony of them doing it. That is clear. They were at two different bars. One, C.F. McCarthy's. I've been there. Small place, local hangout. Good menu, but it's really about the bar, especially after hours. Locals go to drink. But they also go to another place in downtown Canton. It's just across the street. You walk, I don't know, maybe 50 yards or so. You go across the street, 50 yards down the street, next to this little waterfall is the Waterfall Bar and Grill. Same sort of place. Small, local, big bar. They have a menu, but it's a place you go to hang out with friends, socialize, and drink. And that's what they were doing that night. The question is, though, how much did they drink? How much did John O'Keefe drink? How much did Karen Reed drink? Because the allegations here of murder, like what fuels this idea that Karen Reed wants to kill John? Like what would do it? Did alcohol play any role in this at all? And either fueling rage and fueling a fight between two of them, or perhaps in a scenario that no one is arguing for here, that Karen Reed is under the influence and accidentally runs over John O'Keefe? Like, no one's talking about that. The prosecution is saying this is murder, this is done on purpose. The defense is saying she didn't even hit him with her car. It was the people in the house that did it. But in the middle is something that no one's saying, but we know that they're drinking and driving, and it's cold, and then it turns into a snowy night after hours. So how much they had to drink is, I think, very relevant, maybe not to what either side is arguing, but to get to the truth of what really happened here. And that brings me to the next point. Like, were they fighting? Were they fighting? What was their demeanor? What are they doing inside of this bar together? There is video of all of it, so the jury can see it. We'll see it tonight. We'll analyze it. What does it tell us? What does it prove? This video from the night of the alleged murder. This is just before the murder, right? Because they're drinking from like 9 to 11 roughly, over at C.F. McCarthy's. They go across the street for about another hour. That place closes at midnight. And then it's sometime within that hour that this alleged murder takes place. So what's happening just before? We've got videos. We're going to take a look at them. And what impact, to me, this is the real question, like what impact did that alcohol have? Either on the ability to drive, on their ability to get into some sort of alcohol-fueled fight about something? Like, did it impact anything here? And who's going to argue what? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? And ultimately, for me, like, what does it mean as we try to figure out the truth of what happened? A lot of questions I have, right? A lot of questions tonight. Let me bring in Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who is joining us outside that courthouse in Dedham, Massachusetts. Another big day. And I'm just going to start with this. I'm reading comments on social media, and a lot of people are saying, what were these witnesses? Why is the prosecution calling these witnesses? That's what they're saying, but I want to hear from you about these witnesses. Who was called to the stand today in this case?
Vinny, nice to see you. A big testimony at the Dedham Courthouse here behind me, and there was major witnesses called because these witnesses were people that knew John O'Keefe for several years. They were friends with him. How did they know him? Well, he was taking care of his niece and nephew, helping to raise them for several years, 8 years. And they were in sporting events, they were involved with school. And everyone that testified today were also parents and friends in that regard. So let's put it on your screen. These are the folks that testified today. These are the friends that were bar hopping with them at C.F. McCarthy's and the Waterfall. That's Kurt Roberts, who is the friend of the victim and husband of Carrie Roberts. We also saw Michael and Catherine Camerano testify today. She got a little bit emotional. Nicholas and Karina Kalakithas, they testified. And they all testified today as pointing themselves out in those videos at the Waterfall and also at C.F. McCarthy's. And then they also pointed out other key witnesses that we've yet to hear from, including Jen McCabe, she's seen in those videos, and also the Bryants, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, Vinny. They were pointed out in that video, and they were, quote, play fighting or roughhousing at the bar, which is really important, as you know, because the defense is saying that maybe that spilled over into the house and maybe the roughhousing ended up in John O'Keefe getting injured inside that house and put out on the lawn at 34 Fairview.
All right, now we get to see John and Karen together in the bar. We get some sense of, at least, because we don't have the sound, we don't know what the conversations are. You have witnesses testifying about observations, obviously. But as we look at this, what do we know about Karen and John's relationship and how all this is playing out for this jury?
And that's why a lot of people are commenting that these are witnesses that maybe helped with the defense. And because these witnesses are talking about the relationship just hours before the alleged murder took place. They're at the bar with them. And then we see the video of Karen Reed walking in to one of the bars and greeting John, giving him a big hug and then a kiss on the cheek. He buys her a beer. They're affectionate. They were, quote, lovey-dovey, according to the friends that testified today. Here's also part of their testimony saying that they didn't see any problems with the relationship.
You didn't see any evidence of any problems between Karen and John O'Keefe?
I did not.
No arguments or bickering or anything like that?
No.
Neither one of them was complaining about the other, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever see any sort of tension between the two of them?
Not at all.
Did they seem like a normal and loving couple?
Absolutely.
They seemed like they were affectionate and normally affectionate with one another?
Absolutely.
Did you ever have any question about the nature of their relationship, any toxicity in their relationship or any overt indicators that they weren't getting along?
Not to my knowledge, not at all.
You knew that Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed had rekindled a previous relationship from years earlier?
Yes, I did.
And you knew that Mr. O'Keefe was excited about that?
Yes. So I got there around 9 and they got there shortly before 11. So 2 hours.
While at the waterfall, did you have an opportunity to speak with Miss Reed or Mr. O'Keefe just in normal conversation?
Yes, I did.
You engaged both of them, as a matter of fact, didn't you?
Yes.
Was there a time in which Miss Reed was actually singing John's praises that night?
Yes, I did.
What a great dad he was.
Yep.
Objection, move to strike.
I'm going to strike that. Next question.
So really important testimony, Vinny, because none of these friends that testified today said that they saw any fighting. They didn't testify that he wanted to break up with her. That's some of the allegations, because she's charged with second-degree murder here. And the Commonwealth also pushing for motive, saying that Karen Reed didn't want to break up with John O'Keefe. That led to a big fight that night, but no one saw him fighting.
Okay. Yeah, if you're charging someone with murder, doing it on purpose, you don't have to prove motive. We know that, but the jury's going to want to know why. They keep saying this soured relationship. I guess we need to wait to hear perhaps some of these messages that were allegedly left by Karen Reed. Let's get to the end of the night, or the end of the night at the bars. Did John O'Keefe leave with a glass?
That's exactly what we're waiting to find out, because the Commonwealth really didn't emphasize this point. It happened at the end of the day today, day 7 of testimony in the killer cover-up murder trial, and they were playing the video, where everyone's leaving the bar, including John O'Keefe, and you see him right there. Look, it looks like he's holding something in his hand as he's making his way out the door and then into the parking lot. Really key evidence for the Commonwealth, because that could indicate that he's holding a glass, a cocktail glass. And what was the jury shown yesterday? Well, there was that big moment in court when you had Lieutenant Lank pull out of an evidence bag a broken cocktail glass that they say was collected at the scene of the crime, just feet away from where his body was. And they say that this glass was broken during the struggle or whatever happened when he was hit with the car, allegedly. So I'm waiting to see tomorrow if they're going to emphasize this. But everyone that was testifying today said that he was only drinking beer and not a cocktail. So we're waiting to see.
That's such an important piece of evidence, and I'm telling you, everyone in that jury box wants to hear from the folks at the Waterfall Bar. They want them to take a look at that glass and tell, is this what your glasses look like? And then can you show me another one from the Waterfall Bar that looks like the bottom of this broken glass? They all want to see that. I have to presume that prosecutors will do that, but we shall see. Matt Johnson, Court TV crime and justice correspondent at the courthouse. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I want to bring in a special guest joining us in Southborough, Massachusetts, DUI expert and attorney Brian Cimino. Brian, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Great to have you on the program.
My pleasure, Vinny. Great to be here.
Okay, I want to go through some of the information that we have. Obviously, we'll get more as this trial continues, actually put on the record. But let's talk about the level of intoxication or potential intoxication and what information is needed to determine this for the jury. Let's start with John O'Keefe that night. We know he's about 6'2", about 220 pounds. Testimony about plus or minus 6 beers at C.F. McCarthy's when he's there for a couple hours, starting at 7:40, is seen with an alcoholic drink or a beer in his hand at the Waterfall Bar and Grill from 11 to 12. So at a minimum, we're looking at maybe 6 or 7 drinks in that time frame. 6'2", 220. What information would you need, and do you think they'll be able to determine his level of intoxication at the time of his death?
Yeah, so standard protocol in a case like this is that they will take blood. I'm sure they took blood as part of the autopsy. I'm not sure, because he was frozen out in the cold for so long, how productive that blood test will be. But a blood draw obviously is part of the postmortem examination, and I'm sure that was done, and that will hopefully yield some result. I don't know what that will be. We'll see as the evidence comes in. I know the medical examiner is going to testify, and his blood alcohol content will certainly be part of this. But more importantly is obviously the defendant's blood alcohol content, Karen Reed's BAC. She's charged with manslaughter by operating under the influence, and the blood alcohol content is obviously part of that. They need to prove that she was under the influence at approximately 12:45 a.m. when she allegedly struck Mr. O'Keefe.
Yeah, so let's put that up on the board. Some of the information that we know, and we got some information here, you know, could be off by a little bit, but it's from a trusted source. She's about 5'4", about 98 pounds or so. Her ethanol results from the blood reading on January 29th at 9:08 is 93 mg/dLs. I don't know what that stands for, right. Milligrams per something, right? Now,
it stands for milligrams per deciliter.
Okay. Does that number mean something to you? That number, that 93?
Yeah, it does.
Explain to us what it means to you.
Sure. So what they're saying is that's her BAC based on the blood that was drawn. And that blood was drawn at approximately, I want to say 9:08 a.m. is when that blood was drawn from the Good Samaritan Hospital. She's alleged to have struck Officer O'Keefe with her vehicle at approximately 12:45 p.m. So the question is, what was her blood alcohol level at 12:45 p.m.? And the way the Commonwealth is going to try to prove that is with an expert witness and what's called retrograde extrapolation, which is basically fancy language for taking her BAC at a known time, which is when the blood was drawn at 9:08 a.m., and then working backwards using what's called the Widmark formula to determine what her blood was at the time that Officer O'Keefe was allegedly struck, which was 12:45 a.m.
Okay, let's put on the screen what the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab toxicologist is talking about here. Performed a serum conversion and retrograde extrapolation, just like you said. Their opinion, or his opinion, Karen Reed's blood alcohol at 9:08 on the 29th was between 0.07 and 0.08 from his serum conversion analysis, and gives an estimate that her blood alcohol at 12:45 a.m. would have been between, and this is a pretty big range, 0.13 and 0.29%. So first of all, tell us the significance of these numbers and what they mean in terms of how someone is acting and how they can drive, et cetera, when you're talking about 0.07 to 0.08 versus 0.13 to 0.29.
So 0.08 is the legal limit in Massachusetts, and that's the Commonwealth's burden is to prove that she was operating, you know, at that level, which would mean that she was under the influence. But obviously, there's a huge range between a 0.13 and a 0.29, and that is based on extrapolation done by a blood test taken 8.5 hours after the incident. So that's a lot of time to have to account for. And the Commonwealth filed a motion to admit this evidence, this retrograde extrapolation evidence. The defense is objecting to that. The judge hasn't ruled on that. If I were to predict, I believe she will allow it to come in, but I think they're going to have some issues. This will be another so-called battle of the experts, not only with respect to the blood retrograde extrapolation, but how it was collected. I don't think it might not have been collected the way that evidentiary blood would be collected. So I think that's going to be another challenge. But yeah, 0.13 to 0.29 is a huge range. I think at that level, you're definitely exhibiting signs and symptoms of intoxication, glassy bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, difficulty, you know, with thought processes and things of that nature. And I didn't hear any testimony to that effect from the police officers who first encountered her. She was distraught, she was hysterical, but I didn't hear any sort of telltale signs of being under the influence, glassy bloodshot eyes or anything like that. And I don't think there was any testimony today. The bartender who actually served the drinks says that, you know, she was not inebriated, she was not overserved, she was not exhibiting signs of alcohol intoxication when she left the bar.
Brian Simino, great information. Great to have experts here. We appreciate it, sir. Thanks so much. All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the videos. We're going to take a listen to the testimony of the witnesses, bring in our experts, plus coming up next hour.
In Boise, Idaho, a case with so many layers and so much tragedy, it's hard to believe it's true, but it happened. Lori Daybell has been convicted of participating in the murders of her husband's first wife and her own 2 children. She's also been charged with murdering her 4th husband. Now, her current husband, Chad Daybell, is on trial for 3 of those murders.
Dad said that Tammy was going to die early, and that he had related before that he had a portal in his house where he would get information or communication.
This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
It's a controversial case that's divided a community.
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Prosecutors say she ran him over on purpose and left him to die in the cold.
But Reed claims that she's being framed.
It smells suspicious.
After years of legal fireworks, will the truth finally be revealed?
The end game is to figure out who killed John O'Keefe and hold these people responsible.
The killer or cover-up murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Direct your attention or your memory to the video of when Miss Reed actually made her way into McCarthy's.
Yes.
You have that scene in your mind?
Yes.
You saw in the video when Miss Reed actually walked into the location how Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe greeted each other.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct?
Yes.
It appeared that that was quite an affectionate greeting. Would you agree?
Objection.
Do you agree with that?
They kissed. Yeah.
Would you consider a kiss affectionate?
Yes.
They hugged each other, correct?
I don't recall.
Mr. O'Keefe put his right arm out and Miss Reed sort of nestled into his embrace.
Okay.
And that's when he kissed her?
Yes.
Okay. They seemed happy to see each other.
Yes.
You didn't observe while you were at CF McCarthy's with them, you didn't observe any arguing or bickering between the two of them?
No.
As a matter of fact, they were sort of the normal, affectionate, laughing, happy couple that you were used to seeing, correct?
Yes.
There didn't seem to be any tension between them and CF McCarthy's, is that right?
Not that I recall.
So that's at CF McCarthy's. That's the first bar that John and Karen are at. They're there together for about 2 hours, and they go across the street to the waterfall. And again, another one of John O'Keefe's friends witnessing how these two are interacting. Let's take a listen.
You knew that Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed had rekindled a previous relationship from years earlier.
Yes, I did. They were affectionate toward each other, loving towards each other, and to the point where my wife even made a comment, why are you not like that with me?
That's just 1 hour. 1 hour before the murder. Let's bring in our guests. Joining us, criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr., also joining us, Karen Reed supporter and expert Nick Rocco, and YouTube creator behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lanahan is with us as well. Great to see everyone tonight. Joseph, I'll start with you. What are you seeing in the bar? I mean, this is 1 hour before an alleged murder, and everyone's saying, you know, the wife is saying, I wish you were more like John and Karen.
My wife says the same thing. Look, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing really a tragedy. It looks to me like this was a lot of good people having a good night. You know, they're police officers. They should have a cautionary tale. They should have known you don't mix alcohol and getting into a car. But I will say you had an excellent guest on last week that talked about this should have never been charged as a murder case. And I think any suggestion that there was going to be compelling, overwhelming evidence of a hostile relationship and motive for Karen Reed to kill John O'Keefe was basically washed out the door today. Nothing that the niece and nephew can say are going to change that. But likewise, the same people that are outraged that Karen Reed is accused of killing someone have absolutely defamed and disparaged people like Jen McCabe. She was in those videos as well. She was hugging Karen Reed. She was interacting with everyone. All of them were interacting with one another. So the suggestion that Karen Reed committed a murder, I think, is absurd. Likewise, the suggestion that anyone in that house committed a murder is absurd. The glass is interesting because, look,
we'll get to the glass in a second, Joseph. We'll get to it in a second.
Sorry.
Well, no, it's fine. I love the passion. We all love the passion. Nick Rocco, your thoughts?
I mean, we all heard it today. The Commonwealth was trying to bring this theory forward that there was a toxic relationship, and everybody on the stand today who witnessed them that night said no bickering. They were lovey-dovey. One woman wishes her husband acted the way that John was acting towards Karen. I mean, as far as them breaking up and quote unquote, Lally says what happens behind closed doors, what all the witnesses said today is going to prove, and just like Joe said, no matter what the kids say on stand, their relationship was not falling apart. They were excited for a vacation they were going on. She was speaking very highly of John. So you want the people to believe that a 5-minute drive from the Waterfall Bar to 34 Fairview went from lovey-dovey to I'm going to kill you? Don't think so.
Kevin?
It's not first-degree murder, and I think it adds to the state's credibility here that they're bringing forth witnesses not to just push a very black and white narrative, but to give you the truth. So another thing that we noticed here is last summer, Karen said that she was not invited to the house and wasn't even sure that she heard that anybody was invited to the house. But we heard testimony today that she was specifically invited, in fact, by Jen McCabe, and that everybody there was invited. So there goes the idea that the defense opened up by saying that John was ambushed in that invite. No. Everybody was invited to the after-hours party.
Well, let's take a listen to testimony from one of John's friends talking about that invitation.
There was discussion about, well, Jen McCabe brought up, let's go to my sister's house.
And is that somewhere that you or your husband, to your knowledge, had ever been to before?
We had never been to her house before, no.
And was that something that was sort of a private invitation, or was that sort of open to the group at the table?
I think it was said out loud, like, hey, anybody wants to go, we can go to my sister's on Fairview. I wasn't specifically invited myself. I just think it was put out there.
And did either yourself or your husband take anyone up on an invitation? Did you go to Fairview after the waterfall?
We did not go. I actually said to him, there's no way we're going anywhere. We're going home. Karen went over to John, something like that. He like put his arm around her. I don't know if they had a conversation, they talked. It seemed like they were like quite lovey-dovey at that point. And then that's when Jennifer McCabe went up to Karen and said, you're coming with me. And she grabbed her, she put her arm around her and she said in front of me, she's like, you're coming with me, you're coming with me.
Nick, sounds like Jennifer McCabe's kind of friendly there.
Well, I mean, what did we see in that video? We saw Brian Higgins and Brian Albert fake fighting. So John wasn't there at that moment. You know, there's a reason why Jen wanted Karen to go with her. I'm sure there was a plan to rough John up. Now, I don't think anybody intended to kill him, but there was a plan to rough him up. I mean, these two guys, who does that at that age? I mean, you know, I'm 29 years old and I don't even do that in the bar with my friends. That's childish behavior right there.
Well, let's bring in someone a little bit older, Joseph Krowski Jr. What do you think of? You got Brian Higgins on the right, Brian Albert on the left of the screen. What's going on? What does this mean? This activity, this shadow boxing or whatever they're doing there?
Look, that's what I'm talking about. Nick didn't answer your question. If you want to take anything out of this from the Commonwealth, certainly not the acrimony that would result in motive to kill. But Karen Reed clearly was welcomed and invited to that party, especially by the sister, Jen McCabe. So there is a reasonable inference that something happened on that fuel-fired drive from the new Waterfall Grill to the Fairview address. Why wouldn't she go in? There's a reasonable inference that there was some sort of argument and she left in haste. But the suggestion that Jen McCabe, who is engaging and not just inviting John O'Keefe, but inviting the Kalakathathases, the lawyer and the wife to the house to somehow set John O'Keefe to get roughed up, there's zero evidence of. We've got to stop the silly season in this. These are people's lives and reputations. Jen McCabe had come from her daughter's basketball game, put her arm around Karen Reed, said, come to my sister's house. Talk to Nick and his wife, come to my sister's house. And that was part of a plan to lure John O'Keefe there to have him roughed up. You know, that's just absurd.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that you're taking these two guys that, yes, it's guys that have been, listen, Massachusetts guys that spend a lot of time in bars, that are on the rough side like this, they're out drinking, so they're showing each other some moves and playing around like that. To take that and turn it into the idea that the plan was to trick John back into the house where their wives will be, where their kids will be, to ambush him, it's absurd.
Nick, what do you think of, so you've got Brian Higgins on the right. We know he and Karen may or may not have some sort of little thing going on, potentially, yet just in his sight, just in front of him, is John O'Keefe with Karen. What are your thoughts about that dynamic inside the bar?
Well, if there was something going on between Brian Higgins and Karen Reed, that would be a motive for Brian Higgins to want to, do something to John or rough John up. If, you see Karen right there in the video, these two are over here arguing. I don't see where John is in the video at the time, but as far as their relationship goes, though, I don't think that ultimately has to do with whether or not Karen Reed hit him with the car. That still doesn't add up to me as to why, even if they had something going on, why would she hit John with the car? Let's say that Karen was going to start dating Brian Higgins. She would just leave John. What would killing him do?
Kevin, let me ask you, why would you murder someone on the front lawn of a police officer's home?
You mean why would Karen do it, or why would the people inside the house do it?
Why would Karen do it? This is the allegation by prosecutors. So why, if she's going to kill John, would she do it in front of a house full of police officers?
Well, I don't think anybody believes that it was intentional, or if it was intentional, it was something that was just an impulse reaction that happened very quickly. Remember, Lally told the jury to pay special attention to the center console of the SUV. Now, we don't know what that's going to be about, but there's an override system to the safety system right there on that center console. So we'll see what it is. But I don't think anybody really thinks that Karen was planning to kill John and ruin her own life this way, too. I mean, and no more does it make sense that the idea that Brian Albert is going to kill someone inside his house or leave him all but dead and then drop him off on his own lawn. None of this is planned out.
Joseph Krowski, let me ask you, what is the state of mind that the prosecutors have to prove in Massachusetts for the murder that they've charged them with here?
Under the theory of second-degree murder, it requires a showing of malice proved beyond a reasonable doubt. There's 3 separate prongs. You can prove any one of them. 1, the specific intent to kill. 2, the specific intent to cause grievous bodily injury. Or 3, under the circumstances, a person would have the specific intent to do an act which they reasonably know would result in death or serious bodily injury. I don't think they've shown any of them. And if they had that much confidence in the charge, they should have been all in on the murder. They've charged the murder charge, but alternatively, they've charged the motor vehicular homicide by OUI. Look, I think there's a reasonable inference. They drank way too much for a 94-pound woman. They certainly had alcohol, and something stopped her from going into that house when we know clearly she was invited. I think, and I don't want to guess, but probably she left in haste. Some sort of argument, spontaneous argument started, and it was an accident. But again, I don't want anything bad to happen to her. We got a lot more to talk about. And we got to talk about Proctor and things like that, whether or not they can even prove any of the case at this point.
Wait till he takes a stand. All right, when we come back, everyone's staying with us. We're going to talk about that cocktail glass that apparently ended up in the hand of John O'Keefe. Is this him walking out of the waterfall with the glass?
From these different pieces, it's hard to also locates a cocktail glass that's located on the bumper or the rear area of that scene, and she locates a human hair on the back of that defendant's vehicle as well. Now, The cocktail glass on the bumper, you'll also see surveillance video from the waterfall, and Mr. O'Keefe is observed on that surveillance video essentially walking out of the waterfall with a cocktail glass in his right hand. Same right hand that has minor injuries to it, and the same right hand that's attached to his right arm that has the abrasions and lacerations.
Cocktail glass, a big, important piece of evidence in this case. You heard what the prosecutor is saying here. John O'Keefe is leaving the Waterfall Bar and Grill with a glass in hand. Take a look at him. He's walking here. Look at his right hand. Has something in the right hand. Obviously, it's always grainy, this surveillance video. Right here he is outside still with something in his hand. So the question is this the same glass that we saw in court from Lieutenant Michael Lank, pulled out of the evidence bag? Is it the same? Where did this glass come from? We know it's from the scene, but where did it come from? Where was it filled with alcohol or whatever was inside that glass? Was it at the Waterfall Bar? Was it somewhere else? Is it the same glass? Let's bring back in our guests, Joseph Krowski Jr., Nick Rocco, Kevin Lanahan. Nick, what are your thoughts about this, the glass that's found at the scene that we see in evidence versus what is in John O'Keefe's right hand?
Right. I mean, most likely it is the glass from the bar. And when he got out of Karen's vehicle and he went inside the house, which his Apple Health data shows that he went up 3 flights of stairs, and Karen's Apple Health data shows no flights of stairs. He goes inside the house, a fight breaks out, the glass falls and breaks. So whatever John went inside that house with needed to be put outside. There's one problem with that, though. They didn't realize his shoe was missing when they put him outside, and that's why the Canton Police Department didn't find his shoe at 6 in the morning with 4 inches of snow on the ground. They found his shoe at 6 p.m. with a foot of snow on the ground. So if you can find a cocktail glass, you know, in the snow, how did you miss a size 12 shoe? Like, when those police officers left the scene, somebody searched that house, they found stuff, and it ended up outside. Because there's no way the Canton Police Department would miss that shoe. And if they missed it, then the officers on scene are incompetent to miss a shoe that big.
Kevin Lanahan, what are your thoughts about the glass in John O'Keefe's hand? Is that what caused all those cuts on his arm?
I don't know about that, but could you freeze it for just a moment on that, the video of it right outside the bar? And so meanwhile, I don't think either side is going to dispute that that's the glass, as Nick said. The theory of the defense is that after attacking him inside, they brought the glass outside, the broken pieces and the black straw, but yet they didn't bring the shoe out. That seems a little bizarre to me. But the reason I want to freeze, if you can at some point point out that little scene outside the bar where he's carrying that glass, I wanted to point out that there's a solid dusting of snow on top of that car outside. And the reason that's important to me, and I noticed that today, is because later on, yes, right there. So later on, when John is in the yard, if it continues to snow lightly like this off and on for the next couple of hours, he's going to be covered in a light layer of snow in an area where there's no street light. And so somebody walking or driving on that street, their peripheral vision is not going to really catch something that's lying still, that's partly black and partly covered in snow, and is surrounded by other objects to distract your peripheral vision, such as the flagpole, the fire hydrant, the bushes, the trees, and that kind of stuff.
Joseph Krowski Jr.
Hey,
how
great
significant?
Job. Kevin's now directing the show, asking for video clips.
It's great. Well, he knows what he's doing. He's got the headset on. He's running things here, doing a great job. That's why we bring him on. Joseph, what are your how significant is the cocktail glass in all of this?
Really significant because, again, the Furman effect with Trooper Proctor, and we probably need a whole episode to get into that, but there's a suggestion that he planted evidence, including the tail light. He would not have known when he first got to the scene that there would be video surveillance taken from the Waterfall Bar and Grill depicting John O'Keefe carrying a glass that most likely is the same glass from the bar. So now the theory has to stretch to he planted the pieces of tail light, he planted the hair from the head, and then other people in the house took it upon themselves on a moment's notice to gather up the glass and plant it out front. So again, I think the piece of glass is a really important piece of evidence. Again, not to show it was murder, but to show that there is a chance that this was an accident. The crime scene investigation, again, that's going to be more focused on Proctor. I was aghast yesterday when I heard that at 8 o'clock he had called blank and said state police isn't coming. State police comes to every unattended suspicious death, whether it is suspected of a homicide or a motor vehicular homicide. So again, he left it up to the Canton police. But the one thing they did find was pieces of bar glass, and lo and behold, John O'Keefe is leaving the seat in the bar with a bar glass. So it's important.
Nick, what happens in that ride? Why doesn't Karen go inside the home? Why is John going in by himself?
Because when he went inside the house, she was texting him and to find out, should I come in? What are we doing? And he didn't answer. So after a short period of time, she just ended up going home. And, so she ends up going home, which the 2-minute missing library footage would have shown her taillight broken. If she hit him, it would have shown it broken, but it's missing, just like everything else is missing. And we know in Bill Reed's interview on national TV, when Karen Reed told him she may have struck something, Kevin and I both know that what she was speaking about was when she backed out of John's driveway and she backed into John's car. That is the only thing that she hit. She did not hit John O'Keefe with her car. And right here, she hits that's what she was talking about to her father in that interview.
Are there any pieces of taillight found on her driveway?
Well, we saw in other testimony, they snowblowed it. So if there was pieces there, the snowblower would have picked it up and blown it away. So to try to spin it that she's trying to include. Yeah, I see the whole side.
There? It's perfect. It's virgin snow and there's nothing in it.
Nobody's denying her taillight is broken there. But in the dash cam footage, okay, all you can see is straight on.
That.
Of course you do. But when you see the dash cam footage.
Guys, we're out of time for tonight, but we're going to do it again.
All right.
Great insight. Joseph Krosky Jr., great to see you tonight. Nick Rocco, Kevin Lenahan, appreciate it. We'll do it again.